In the beginning, the Great Spirit created a single people. These original people fought and murdered each other over trivial things. This angered the Great Spirit, and he sent a massive flood to purify the world. Only one person survived. They tried to dig up the dirt below the waves and pile it together to create a new land, but the water was much too deep. Countless animals tried after them, but to no avail, and after all other animals were exhausted, the muskrat volunteered. They were gone longer than any other animal, and finally he floated to the surface, lifeless. However, in his paw was a handful of dirt, to which they placed on the turtle's back, and at that moment, it grew to immeasurable size. A huge island in the middle of a flooded world. This is Ancestoria, the first peoples of the New World. The Beringians faced a changing world at the end of the last glaciation. The Earth's temperatures rose dramatically beginning around 17,000 years ago, and the sea devoured our lands. Over the next 4,000 years, animals and humans alike journeyed to the highlands of North America. Many different bands may have individually made this journey. Most of them traveled overland through an ice-free corridor, but this was still an arduous journey for the first groups, with bone-chilling winds and sparse vegetation. There is probable cause to suspect that other groups made the journey along the coast, traveling in boats as they floated down the newly flooded continental shelf. They would have faced strong winds, floating ice, and threats of hypothermia. The land connecting Asia to North America fully flooded 13,000 years ago, cutting off any further land migration to the Americas. By this time, Native Americans had diversified and begun to split along genetic and cultural lines. Native Americans settled on the eastern seaboard 14,500 years ago in what is now known as the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter. Although only seasonally, it saw continuous habitation for possibly over 16,000 years, making it the longest continuous habitation in the Americas. Those who expanded down the coast reached Monteverde in southern Chile around 14,000 years ago, which would make this the longest sea voyage up to this date, traveling over 15,000 kilometers. We would make our appearance on the pampas of Argentina and the tropical forests of Brazil shortly afterwards. The Clovis culture developed 13,200 years ago. Centering around the Clovis Point, a multi-purpose attachment for projectiles, it gave our ancestors enormous mobility advantages by adapting their weaponry at a moment's notice. This allowed them to effortlessly expand into diverse environments. Chumash people on the coast of California established elaborate societies based on permanent settlements, heavily relying on the sea, and established a trade network between coastal villages and the surrounding islands. The natives on the Great Plains were the only big game hunters remaining in the Americas. It required the cooperation of several bands, stalking the buffalo for days on end, encircling them to corral them into swampy lands or off of cliffs, finishing them as necessary. Our ancestors conquered every biome in the New World, placing one of the last areas of Earth under our influence. Humans now inhabited every continent except Antarctica. From east to west, a once insignificant ape had begun a process to bend the nature of the planet to satisfy our quest for greatness. This is Ancestoria, the history of our ancestors.